here at the whole idea of the surpluses and how they can be used to analyse different policies by the government. So we're going to look at taxes and subsidies and then look at the whole idea of tariffs in the market. So just a reminder, of course, that the consumer surplus is the area that is bounded by the demand curve up here and the price of the good that the consumer has to pay. So the demand curve measures their marginal benefit, the price is the cost to them, and so this is a surplus where the benefit exceeds the cost. So if you remember from the last video, the benefit is going to be bigger than the cost at any of these points here, any quantity right up to here. And then from the point of view of the producer, well, that's their revenue. They're going to get this price in the market and they would have produced it at that price. And so again, the benefit to the producer here, the benefit is bigger than the cost at any point along there. And so all of those are economic welfare. So this whole area here is the welfare of the economy. Now let's have a look at how that changes when you get to putting taxes on. So when you put a tax on, remember that you are basically saying that the firm is willing and able to supply at this price, but now let's say the government put a £50 tax on. You're saying that the firm will have to charge £50 more because it doesn't keep that tax, it pays it over to the government, and so therefore they're only willing and able to supply this quantity here if they get a higher price, because this lot here is going to disappear over to the government once they've taken it from the consumer. So from this original equilibrium here, the argument is that the market moves to this point here, and that's the price the consumer pays. This is the price in the market. Then that price is received by the firm, but this amount here is passed over to the government, so the firm only keep a price down here. Now how does this affect the surpluses? Well, these are the surpluses before the tax is put on, remember, and that one disappears, and then this is your new surplus here. So this is your new consumer surplus. It was this area here, but now it's only that area there. The producer surplus disappears, and the producer surplus is now there. So hopefully you can see that those surpluses are smaller with the tax than without the tax. Now that's the area there of the change in the consumer surplus, and the change in the producer surplus would be given by that area there. So it looks like that's a bad thing, because obviously from the whole economy point of view you've lost all of this in terms of economic welfare. However, you've got to remember that the government will receive a tax. So I'm going to put that in now. That's the tax the government are going to receive, and so therefore you are left with these two welfare loss triangles here from a tax point of view. In other words, although you gained this area and you gained that area, so you lost this area and you lost that area there, the government have received this, and so your net loss of welfare is only that triangle there. So you can see how the surpluses and the welfare idea is important when you're analysing, evaluating taxation. So it's bad for consumers, bad for producers, good for the government, but bad overall for the welfare of the economy. Moving to a subsidy, remember what a subsidy does. It says, well, here is my supply curve with a subsidy, and that's basically saying at any point here, the firms are saying, I'm willing and able to supply up here, but if your government give me a subsidy, I'll be willing and able to supply at a lower price, because I'll get that from the market, and then I'll take that subsidy, thank you very much, from the government. So it reduces the price in the market to here, and therefore that's the new consumer price there. The price the consumer pays is down here, but then remember, the firms receive that from the market and then that much from the government, and so the firms end up getting a higher price over there. Now what's the effect on the surpluses? Well, the triangles you got already are the surpluses before the subsidy, so let's take those out. What is going to be the surplus now? So This is your new consumer surplus, the area bounded by the price the consumer pays and the demand curve. And there's the change in the consumer surplus. It's a nice positive change because the price has gone down. What about the producer? Well, the producer, which was getting that price, and so that was their surplus here, is now getting a higher price in the market, and so they're getting a higher producer surplus. And so the change in the producer surplus now is that box there. So that's the change in the producer surplus. That was the change in the consumer surplus. And those are increases, they're rises in the surpluses. Now, is that good for the economy as a whole? Well, there we are. Those are the two rises that we're finding for the consumer and the producer. But, of course, the government have to pay that as a subsidy. And so even though you've gained that and you've gained that, the cost to the government is the whole area here, and so therefore you end up with what we call a welfare loss triangle there, which is basically saying that the government paid too much in the market for that increase in the quantity. Okay. So let's have a look at tariffs on this next one here, and you can see that we draw in a home supply curve and a home demand curve here, and let's put in the two surpluses. So there they are, the two surpluses are there. Now, you've maximised your welfare at this point, but can I get it even better? Well, this is the argument. What if you have a world market over here, and this country is very, very, very small, so it's not going to affect the world price however much it demands. So the world price is lower than the equilibrium price. So this price over here is lower than that price there. So what happens if you start to open yourself to trade is that you're going to get here a world price down here, because that's the world price. And so therefore we can see that if you were consumers now at this lower price, you're going to extend your demand to here. And so therefore your consumer surplus is going to go up. So instead of it being here, it is now that big box there. I'm going to take that away and show you the change in the consumer surplus. And there it is. That's the change in the consumer surplus from that introduction of openness to trade. So that's a benefit to the economy, benefit to consumers. They're paying a lower price, higher output. Lower price means they get higher real income, and you can argue again, can't you, that you've got more choice, etc., when you open up to trade. Now, what about this whole area here? Well, the poor old producers in the home market, which had that as a surplus, okay, now only get this. So the home production falls to this point here. I'm not putting those drops down here at the moment. So therefore what you argue is that is the loss of producer surplus. So this box here is the loss of the producer surplus, but the big blue box there, this whole box here, is the gain in consumer surplus. And so you still have a welfare gain from being open to trade. And that's quite a nice and easy way to show the benefits of international trade. Okay, what happens though if you put on this tariff? As we said, that's the most important thing. Well, if you put a tariff on, you're going to raise the world price and put a tariff on by this amount here. Okay, so the world price goes up, and you can see that instead of the consumers here, the price has gone up for the consumer, and so they're going to consume this much. But the good old home producers, which were producing only that much, now some of them can produce more, and they get up to here. But what about the surpluses? Well, that was the old consumer surplus before the tariff. That's the consumer surplus after the tariff. And so therefore the argument is that is the lost consumer surplus. So putting a tariff on is not good for consumers. Higher prices, lower output, and a lost consumer surplus. However, what about the welfare of the economy? Well, what we have to argue then is that there's your consumer surplus that's been lost, but the good old producers who've got more surplus, They used to be able to supply this triangle here. That was their surplus. Now they've expended their output, so it's here. And so that area there is a gain in producer surplus. The government have also gained in that tax area. But those two gains, this box here and that tariff gain here for the government, have not overcome the whole of that white box, and so you end up with two welfare loss triangles. So it's a lot to take in, but you really need to be able to work with those videos and show these areas. If you're in the exam, of course, you can't use colours, so you've got to use, your lettering A, B, C, D, E, F, G, whatever you're going to do to show that loss. But hopefully that explains why surpluses are really quite important in the world of economics.